Greenpeace could lose out on tax-deductible donations due to its campaign to improve the health of the Great Barrier Reef. Queensland LNP Senator Matt Canavan is writing to the Environment Minister Greg Hunt, asking for Greenpeace to be removed from the register of environmental organisations that receive tax-deductible gift status. He says the group has, quote, repeatedly and blatantly broken the law by spreading highly misleading information about the reef. Senator Canavan is taking on Greenpeace. This follows UNESCO's decision over the weekend not to officially list the natural wonder as being in danger, though it has placed Australia on notice that more work needs to be done to protect and restore the reef. Matt Canavan is in our Parliament House studios. He's speaking with our political editor, Alison Canavan.
Matt Canavan, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Alison. Great to be here.
Senator, you say Greenpeace has repeatedly broken the law, in particular but not exclusively over its campaign on the Great Barrier Reef. Can you give me some examples of how it has blatantly broken the law?
Well, I don't just need to give you examples, Alison. You can quote directly from Greenpeace, actually in a submission they made to Treasury, to the government, to the Australian government. In 2011, there was an inquiry about the Charities Act. Greenpeace proudly said that we have blocked train lines, occupied Lucas Heights, trespassed at the lodge, illegally raised banners at Parliament House, amongst other activities. And they said they're allowed to do that, and I'm paraphrasing now, because their actions were in the public benefit. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I don't think people or organisations have the right to say when they break the law it's in the public benefit. If they want to break the law, that's fine, but they've got to bear the consequences of it. They can't decide. We can't have individuals running around deciding which laws they obey and which they don't.
But if it has broken the law, shutting down coal exports, for example, why isn't anyone in jail? Maybe you are exaggerating the nature of Greenpeace's campaigning.
Well, in fact, in 2011, two members of Greenpeace scaled a 1.8 metre fence, a CSIRO facility, nothing to do with coal. It was a GM wheat crop. These two individuals destroyed the GM wheat crop. Greenpeace posted a video about it, proudly promoting it. Ultimately, the ACT Magistrates Court fined Greenpeace $280,000 and the two activists were given suspended jail sentences. Now, that's just one example. I've got about 5 or 6 here of specific examples in the last 5 years of them breaking the law. Now, again, people can do that. They've got to bear the consequences, but I don't think taxpayers should help pay the fines of those consequential law breaches.
And one of the consequences is that you want Greenpeace removed from the register of environmental organisations that receive tax-deductible gift status. Do you know how much Greenpeace costs taxpayers through receiving tax-deductible donations? Do you have a figure?
My understanding is that in the last reporting year, Greenpeace received around $20 million, I think $19.4 million in tax-deductible donations. Now we don't have, well, it depends on the average tax rate of the individual donors, but normally a costing would give an average tax rate around 30%, so you're looking at around $6 million.
Well, there are about 600 conservation groups that receive tax-deductible donations. It's not just Greenpeace. There is a government-initiated inquiry into their tax-deductible status. Are you out to nobble any green group that campaigns against government policy?
Absolutely not, Alison. You're right. There's about 600 of them, and in fact, I've made a submission to that inquiry, and I've looked through them, and I think, indeed, I would conclude that the vast majority of them are doing the right thing and do have an environmental purpose, which is what is required under the Income Tax Assessment Act. But there is a minority of organisations that are not about protecting the environment. They're about getting political and social change. And that is their right, their democratic right to do that. I just don't think taxpayers should be supporting it.
But who's to say that a person donating to an environmental group didn't want that money spent on political or social change? Maybe they want a group like Greenpeace to take political action. Maybe that's why they made the donation in the first place.
I've got no problem with that. If that's what floats your boat, if that's what you like to do on your weekend, tie yourself to a dozer somewhere or something in rural New South Wales, go for your life. I don't want to stop people from doing that. I just don't believe the taxpayer should be subsidising it. That's the point. So under the Charities Act, charities absolutely have the right to politically campaign, but this is a different act. It's the Income Tax Assessment Act, and we do not have any obligation to provide groups that want to protest or break the law with a tax-deductible gift status.
And would you be able to prove that donations are being spent on political advocacy, political activism, and not environmental projects?
Well, I don't have to prove that. The groups themselves quite proudly say they have a right to do these things, and therefore do use their donations, their tax-deductible donations to their public fund to do these things. They have the position that they should have a fundamental right for the taxpayer to support these activities. That is their right to have that position. I violently disagree with that position. I don't think we should be giving one group on a political debate a leg up. We should have a neutral tax system which allows everybody to have their say in this debate.
Now, UNESCO concedes that significant progress has been made addressing the problems on the Great Barrier Reef. Would those improvements ever have been made without the work of groups like Greenpeace? Haven't they done a service to the rest of the country, highlighting the environmental challenges facing the reef?
Well, I look across what's happened in Australian politics in the last 40 years, and I see governments of both political persuasions doing enormous things to help protect the reef. And both the establishment of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, which happened under the Fraser government, the more recent attempts to reduce runoff and silt runoff in the catchments of the Great Barrier Reef.
And would that have happened without
that was
the pressure
happening
from
before.
green
That was
groups?
happening before these particular campaigns, and I think they will continue. The reef is, and I live on the reef, right? I live on the southern Great Barrier Reef at Yeppoon in central Queensland. The reef is suffering a little at the moment, but the major reason for that is the violent cyclones and storms we've had in the last decade that do enormous damage, and there's no policy and no government that can stop that.
Matt Canavan, the issue of the day is Bill Shorten's marriage equality bill. You are opposed to same-sex marriage. You take the more traditional view of marriage. That being the case, do you believe the party room should still be given a say on this issue through a conscience vote?
No, I don't, Alison. I believe, at least I'm in the Nationals Party, I believe one of the fundamental founding principles of our party is defence of traditional values, defence of the family, and defence of marriage.
But you also have a strong tradition when it comes to MPs voting with their conscience.
Absolutely.
How do you reconcile the two?
Well, this is where there's a misunderstanding. There's not a question about whether we have a conscience vote or not. The question for the Nationals Party room, and I believe the Liberal Party room as well, is whether we have a policy on marriage or not. Now, if we don't have a policy, people can go do their own thing. If we do have a policy, people can still do their own thing, but they will be voting against party policy. They would not be able to do that if they're in the ministry under our guidelines and rules that have been around for decades. Now, I believe that the Liberal and National parties should have a policy on marriage.
Which they do.
And I think they should retain a policy on marriage. But I'm not saying necessarily one way or the other here, whether it's pro-gay marriage or against gay marriage. I do think they should have a policy because it's a fundamental aspect of what it means to be in the Commonwealth Government. It is listed under Section 51 of the Constitution, one of only 39 things we're given responsibility for. And one of those things is marriage. We're not going to have a conscience vote on foreign policy. We're not going to have a conscience vote on weights and measures. We're not going to have a conscience vote on the national currency. We shouldn't have a conscience vote on marriage either.
MPs who support same marriage are lobbying hard for a vote this year. How hard will opponents like yourself be lobbying against same-sex marriage, or will you and the people who subscribe to your view of traditional marriage within the party room effectively be running dead, considering there now does seem to be an almost unstoppable momentum for gay marriage rights in this country?
I never run dead, Alison. I play a lot of footy and cricket in my time, and you never give up. You never give up. And I don't believe that's an accurate assessment of the situation.
So you'll try and block a vote this year?
No, well, it's not about... Sorry, I might have misunderstood you. I will never give up to... Whether it's a vote or not, it's a matter for the Parliament, but I will never give up on fighting to maintain a policy position. It's not a policy position on marriage. When that vote occurs, or if it occurs, look, I'm not so worried about, but I will fundamentally fight for us to maintain a policy, a strong policy, to defend traditional marriage and represent the thousands of members that support us.
The fight is not over.
The fight is not over.
Matt Canavan, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Alison.
That's Queensland LNP Senator Matt Canavan speaking with our political editor, Alison Carabine. And a little later in the program, we'll be speaking with Lyle Shelton, the Managing Director of the Australian Christian Lobby.